Excited to be here today. This is one of my favorite events we do of the year. See lots of folks rolling in, which is very exciting. Have some cool stuff to talk about today. Even though it's not basketball season, probably better actually that it's not basketball season right now, so Jay can have a clear head.
It's not far away though. We are 5 weeks from training camp, I think.
Wow, it's amazing, isn't it? It seems like the season just ended yesterday.
Yep. Off season is quick, and even quicker when you go to the finals.
That's fair enough. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a good number of folks joining us today. As I mentioned, we're excited to be here. My name is Jonathan LaCour, and today's kind of webinar is about the Boston Celtics. So a great relationship that Mission has had. We're going to talk about some really exciting things about how the Celtics have actually gotten a competitive advantage with AWS, doing some really interesting stuff. So let's go ahead and do a formal introduction to myself. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Mission. We'll talk a little bit about who Mission is in a moment. But I've been in the cloud space for quite a long time, both as an operator and a builder of public clouds, and a user and in person who deploys into public clouds. So at Mission, I guide our kind of R&D team, product and platform. We do lots of core automation. We define the products and services that Mission provides. And I do a lot of executive sponsorship for key customers like the Boston Celtics. So Jay, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jay Westland, and I am CTO and Vice President of Operations here at the Celtics. So it's sort of two pillars I have, but in the IT technology pillar, we do all infrastructure, whether it's computer-based or game-based for the actual game at the arena, and AV and anything that comes along on that side of our business. And I've been here since the earth cooled, and the moment, no sign of leaving for now. And it's been a great run at the Celtics. My background was really semiconductors before I kind of switched to IT and came to the Celtics.
Nice. Yes, I love. We always have great conversations, Jay and I, about kind of the progression of technology. It's amazing how far we've come, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So thank you, Jay, as always, for joining us. So a little bit about Mission. Who are we? Well, we are an AWS Premier Tier Services partner, both along the consulting side and with managed services and cloud services. We were founded back in 2017. And since that time, we've had a pretty meteoric growth and have over 400 customers now, over 300 team members kind of distributed all around the country, North America, and the world, including well over 100 that are actually engineers, cloud analysts, architects, and consultants that work with our customers. We are 100% certified for our service delivery organization, over 180 certs. 100% distributed team, as I mentioned, and the results show our net promoter score is off the charts, and our customer satisfaction is as well. So we're very proud of working with our customers and delighting them and making sure they're successful. In terms of kind of our focus areas, we do a variety of different things. We have multiple practices, and so migrations is one of our practices. We've helped lots of customers get into the cloud, and once they're there, we do a lot of operations, optimization, and security to help make sure that our customers are only spending what they need to, that they are consistently up and running from a 24/7 coverage perspective, and then we do modernization as well to continuously improve their platforms. We can even help with software application development and data analytics and machine learning. It's really great practice areas for Mission. In terms of some of the investments we've made over the last kind of couple of years, you can see a number of competencies and service designations. And so these are vetted and tested by AWS. So achieving these competencies is no easy task, and we're very proud to have added many over the last few years. We're also covered by all of your security certifications that you'd probably be interested in from a security and compliance perspective, including SOC 2 Type 2 and ISO 27001. All right, that's enough boring stuff about mission. Let's talk about the exciting stuff, the Celtics. And I'll hand it to Jay in a moment, but really where it all begins is basketball analytics, using the cloud to secure a competitive edge by looking at data. And Jay's team got started with this a while ago, and it's sort of like Moneyball for basketball. So Jay, maybe give us a little bit about kind of the origins of the Basketball Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, we have a group that we call Basketball Intelligence Agency. Danny Ainge actually named it as a takeoff on the CIA called the BIA. And it's a group of sort of mathematicians and coders working together, and the lines between those two get blurred. The mathematicians certainly do some coding these days, the coders do some math, but we started with a smaller group, but doing the same stuff well over a decade ago, analyzing, taking the NBA data and trying to put some real analytics around it. And we started, this really all started way back in the early 90s when the NBA decided it was time to modernize their scoring system. At the time, scoring in basketball was done by hand on paper and faxed in at the end of the night. The box score is faxed into the league. And in the early 90s, the NBA decided that they needed to get all of that data collection courtside, everything that happened on the court, they needed to get into the computer. And they didn't, even initially in 1990, the first year we did this, they weren't even quite sure why, but they knew that having it on a piece of paper was a bad thing and we needed to get it into a database. And so the first year was all about making this sort of real time, and it's very real time. Nobody's going to stop a basketball game waiting for somebody at a scoring computer to get it to work. So this real time scoring application that you record everything that happens on the court and get it into a database. And the NBA was absolutely right, and it's just grown and grown from there. More and more data, more and more people recording more and more things. But the core function of collecting everything that happens on the court and getting it into the database is what then allows groups like our BIA to start to dig into that data and try and figure out trends and figure out how you can best use what we're seeing on the court to our advantage and exploit what we're learning from the data.
Yeah, it's amazing that the journey started so long ago, and I think it's a good reinforcement that, even if you're not entirely sure about what your data is going to be useful for, if it seems like it can provide you with insight, it generally can be actually quite inexpensive to archive data, right? That could become extremely useful later. And I do think, looking at kind of how that data starts being used, there's a variety of motivating factors for that, and television is certainly one, right? And I believe, Jay, if I'm correct, what we're seeing here is the actual data viz that's shown in TV live, right?
Yeah, the tool from Second Spectrum is the player positioning data. I forget, they might have some other name for it too. But we do this optically with a bunch of cameras that track everything that goes on the court, what each player is doing, what the ball is doing, what each referee is doing. And that data is actually used both by the television broadcast entertainment people, as well as then the basketball analysts use the data for scouting and changing what we're doing on the court purposes. So this is one data collection tool that then is used by multiple different groups doing different things. And this is the sort of maybe second and a half generation of the player tracking data in the NBA, and they're working on what the next generation, the third generation, will look like. We have one more year with this system, and then there'll be some newer system, which is generally trying to get more accurate and more data. They're going to probably have more cameras to get better accuracy and faster processing. Some of this processing happens in real time so that you can see it on TV. Some of the processing actually is batch and still takes after the game before we get all the data back from this tool.
Absolutely, and it's pretty incredible to me because with these cameras, it's getting positional information, kind of direction. It's getting where the players are shooting from, and the all of this data is combined together along with additional sources, right? And so it's not just one place you're getting data; you're getting it from a whole group of places. So let's talk about some of those other data sources, Jay. Where else are you getting data from?
Yeah, so the data, that's a really good point, that the data from the optical tracking is happening over the course of a game, second by second, play by play, and all of those, the other parts of the data are coming from other places. So in the NBA, we're entering the scoring data courtside, and that gets matched up with timestamps to that same player positional tracking. So the in-game data from multiple sources gets married so that it all refers to the same play, or at least the same second in time. But there's also other things that go on in scouting that have nothing to do with today's game or tomorrow's game. And those data sources are used for more player scouting kind of purposes. So we get data from amateur sports, NCAA. We get a lot of data from overseas, from international games, et cetera. And so we store all of that in our own database. The NBA certainly stores most of this as well in their data, and other teams, some teams store some of it, some don't store it all. But we take all of these different data sources and we then rebuild it into our own database that our analysts and coders can then tear back apart.
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing about this is everybody has access to this data. All of the teams have access to this data. But it's a matter of the teams making an investment and actually using it to create that advantage. And I think you can see pretty clearly from the Celtics' performance that this has given a performance advantage, along with many other factors, great coaching. It's impacting the draft, it's impacting, game planning, and it's pretty incredible. So let's talk a little about this legacy architecture. And we have another slide on this as well, which I love because it's, you went through one time with me and said, I think I have a slide from like 10 years ago or 9 years ago of the legacy architecture. But, originally, how were you getting this data into and where was it living?
The data sources came to us and still somewhat come to us in various ways, but ultimately we get a data feed. Either we get it through FTP, or somebody writes it to an S3 bucket, or we make an API call to get it. And today, in the early days, it was mostly data that we had to get through, usually like some sort of an FTP pull to get the data. And then we were storing it, up until very recently, we were storing it in MS SQL. Originally in true MS SQL servers. More recently than that, we were transferred to Amazon's RDS instance of MS SQL. But ultimately, we were taking that data and then rebuilding it into our own tables in SQL. And that persisted up until very recently, actually, that architecture, at least on the core of the database.
And the servers actually were a wonderful way to keep Jay warm during the cold Boston winters, because they lived in your actual office, right?
Yeah, I did actually. We just the office you're seeing me on here. We've been here for all of, I don't know, 4 weeks maybe. We just moved, but in our old offices, which were a whole 200 yards away. My office was actually connected to the data center, and I did that on purpose when we built that office 20 years ago. I thought it made sense for the IT manager to be connected to the data center, sort of old school. And then as those 20 years progressed, it's no longer very relevant for me to be connected to the data center, because there's very little of the data center left here in our building. But back in the early days, indeed, the SQL Server, all the servers were in our data center and ran on-prem prior to the AWS initial migration. We ran them every day, physical first, VMware after that, but nonetheless, we ran the servers ourselves initially.
And you can see that this is sort of like the big early beginnings of, hey, maybe we should be using Amazon here. This would potentially be a good move for us. And there were incremental steps made, but I think the key thing is to understand why and how those steps were made. And this is that infamous architecture diagram that Jay dug up from his computer many moons ago. So prior to migrating to the AWS cloud, it was, as I said, in Jay's office. But there were some challenges, right? Because you're running on this, big iron, because you're using the statistical processing platform called R. And in order to get your maximum, kind of performance, you needed the biggest kind of servers that you could get access to within your budget. And at the same time, most of the time, these things are just sitting around, right? So you had bandwidth constraints, getting the data down into your office. You had a high cost to buy out these physical servers, not to mention the fact that the performance wasn't ideal because you weren't parallelizing it in any way. And data processing could take long enough that you weren't analyzing that data until over 24 hours after it was available. And I imagine that was a huge issue for your coaches.
Yeah, all of that. These are classic old school IT problems of of having to put more iron at something than you wanted just for that peak period of time when somebody decided they wanted to analyze something or multiply a matrix. In our case, is generally what they're trying to do, a really big matrix. And so you have all this iron sitting there, burning power, et cetera. It led originally, in the early 2000s to virtualization, and then later as the 2000s progressed into cloud, where we wanted to optimize. We wanted to have the performance available, the memory, the bandwidth, the compute cycles available, but we didn't want to pay for each and every one of those things, the memory, the bandwidth, the compute cycles, when we weren't using them. So it led first to virtualization and then to cloud. And it all was about trying to get more and more data in and being able to crunch it and have it available for our coaching staff. And our coaching staff,
right.
The way it works in the NBA is, in all sports probably, but in the NBA and the MLB, where you kind of have game after game after game as the week progresses, the coaches get up in the morning and the first thing they want to do is they want to analyze the data from last night. They want to look into the data from last night at least. And that could be data from a game we played in last night, or it could be data from a game that our next opponent played in last night. So they get up and it's 6 a.m. and they want everything there at their fingertips at 6 a.m. And it seems pretty reasonable. The game was over at 11 p.m. or midnight the prior night. 6 a.m. seemed pretty reasonable, but it turned out that to do what we were doing with all the amount of data from all around the league and be ready at 6 a.m. proved much harder than we thought. And for quite a while, we ran a day behind. So that what the coaches were looking at today on, what is today, Thursday, really wasn't the results of Wednesday night's game. It was the results of Tuesday night's games, and they were always a day behind. And they didn't like that. They'd pick up a box score from last night because we could have box scores available. And they'd say, hey, how come it says he played 13 games, but your data here says he's only played 12 games? And so anyway, other than the silly questions, the data just wasn't new enough. And so that led us into deeper migrations, which I assume is coming up next, Jonathan.
Yes, that is next. Okay. That's correct. Phase one of our AWS migration together. And this is when we really started working together closely. And we wanted to really target those three priorities based upon some of those challenges that Jay mentioned. Performance, we wanted to really compress down that time of processing. We wanted to make sure that the cost and operational efficiency were there, right? This is a big advantage to being in AWS. We wanted to use managed services where possible. We wanted to reduce the spend by having these servers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we wanted to take advantage of the bandwidth constraints that we were experiencing in the Celtics data center. And the fact that we have a utility model in the cloud. Servers can be shut down when they're not in use. So this was really kind of the phase one approach, was a simple incremental improvement. Let's get everything that we have today into AWS. Let's make it so that we can turn this server off, or these servers off, when they're not being used. Let's use RDS for the SQL Server databases, and take advantage of the high bandwidth that is available in AWS. So all of this was sort of, I wouldn't call it low-hanging fruit. It was medium-hanging fruit in some cases. Definitely a lot of work in that first phase, but it really was quite successful, right? I think after phase one, 99% of the platform was running on Amazon, and the data processing time plummeted by 75%. So we got down to 4 hours. And obviously, this was a huge boon, a big success for your coaches.
Yeah, so getting down to 4 hours means we could indeed get all the data from the prior night processed before the coaches woke up. Barely, because if you think about it, we're on the East Coast, so coaches say go to bed at midnight. Well, the West Coast games are still going on at that point. They don't wrap up. All the data is not really available from the West Coast games until maybe 1 a.m. on the East. So didn't give us a lot of leeway, but it got us where we needed to get. All the data was there, available. We could get it in, and we could do all our crunching and have all our analyzed data, if you will, done before everybody wake up and start working again at 6 a.m. So that was huge. The one thing Jonathan mentioned that I always like to reiterate is one of the key reasons we were able to do this, and one of the driving factors of AWS is bandwidth. Bandwidth's kind of the enabling technology for everything these days, right? Not these days, for the last couple decades, really. And the bandwidth in the case of what we had been running prior to this was, the bottleneck really was we were still passing some data back and forth from the cloud to our own servers. And that seemed like a good idea when we started it. I said, oh, let's keep the super private stuff in my own data center because I can touch it and feel it and stand in front of it and protect it from bad people. And we'll put some of the outward facing stuff in the cloud because it makes sense, because the coaches might be on the road and they might want to access stuff from the road. But that was really a bad decision. I never should have done that. I should not have split up the front end and the back end into two different places. So when we then got the front end and the back end all into AWS, the bandwidth, if you will, sort of what I call the virtual backplane between servers, was so fast that that 14 hours to 4 hours just sort of came along just as we had hoped, and indeed it did.
Awesome. And Jay, just so you know, we have a whole bunch of questions rolling in as well. And audience, please don't hesitate. You can drop them either in the chat or in the questions and answers interface within GoToWebinar. I'll touch on a couple of these now because I think they relate to the things we've just talked about. So the first was really about migration of data. So in terms of curation and ingestion, streaming, SFTP, et cetera, how do we get the data up into AWS? And did things change in terms of the ingest, like being able to get that data? Were we still pulling it? Was it getting pushed? Let's talk a little bit about that.
It changes all the time, and it's still changing, and all of those things are part of it, and it varies by source. The NBA data up until very recently, we were indeed getting with SFTP. The second spectrum data gets written to an S3 bucket that we have a key to, and we take it and we actually move it to our own S3 bucket just for convenience. The NBA data is moving this coming season. It will be completely by API pull. We will no longer be SFTP in it. So all of those ways of getting the data into our environment is part of it. And then there's sort of these traditional Cody ETL kind of things that I don't even know what they mean anymore. They've surpassed me. But once we get the data from SFTP or an API pull, or somebody writes it to an S3 bucket, once we have it, then there's a bunch of automation written around the ingestion of taking that data and building it into our custom tables that have been built by our coders for our coders to be able to then do whatever they want to do to dig in deeper. Was that too long-winded? Sorry.
No, that's great, and actually it does lead into sort of the next question. Trevor asked, how is the SFTP-based data real time? And the answer is that it's not. The measurement and collection of that data on court is in real time, realish time. But that data is then, having an initial kind of phase of being, kind of dumped from all the telemetry that is on court, and then it is processed, and combined, and then uploaded to a bucket or whatever, and then it's pulled down afterwards. So it comes fully formed.
After a game is concluded, it gets bundled up, and then we SFTP it. And again, that is all being replaced by real-time API pulls. So if we wanted to do analysis during the game, after every play for that matter, we can today now do that. We're not dependent on waiting till the end of the game to get all the data. Although at the moment there doesn't seem to be a lot of impetus from coaching staffs to really look too much within a game and look at things play by play and try and make any decisions. That a little bit of that is going on, but for the most part, the most coaching staffs are still very much sort of game plan oriented. Here's our game plan, and this is what we're going to do. and I don't really want to see a lot of data in the middle of the game because I really can't rethink my game plan during the middle of the game. There's certainly some that's not 100% true, but it still is more true than you might think.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When we get to kind of the end, we'll talk a little about the future and where we are today. I do think, there is a possibility for things like machine learning models. So we could have a team by team model of what the expected behavior of a team is. And if we detect an anomaly, we could send an alert out to the coaches and say, hey, we thought this is how they behave, but they've adjusted what they're doing, right? And so I think there's opportunity. Actually, it seems sort of like sky's the limit, to be quite honest with you. So I'm really looking forward to having that availability and starting to get creative. It really does remind me of the very beginning, right? You had all this data, and it was like, well, let's save it, but we don't know what we're going to do with it just yet. And I think now that we can have it in realish time, some really interesting stuff that we could do.
Yeah, I think especially the one thing that where there is a little bit of time in a basketball game is halftime. And we do a little bit of analysis at halftime, usually more sort of video based. We show the players a handful of key plays, good, bad, indifferent. We did, the other team did, varies. But at halftime, there is a little bit of time to look at what you did in the first half and talk about adjustments for the second half. The timeout thing it happens a little bit too. You all see that, everyone sees it on TV, and there is some more slight adjustments that can happen at timeouts, but halftime is the one time where you do certainly a chance. So I could see machine learning certainly playing into what you would do at halftime and how you would adjust, if not even timeout by timeout.
Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting. So let's talk phase 2. So as I mentioned, phase 1, there absolutely was some work done to kind of re-platform and so on, but not a lot, right? It was really more focused on let's get there and start taking immediate advantage. Phase 2 was some, re-platforming and optimization. And, the real goals here were resiliency, continued cost reduction, continued improvements in performance, and eliminating your legacy, right? So Jay, you don't have a huge team, right? It's a very small but very mighty team. And every minute that they're spending on operational tasks is a minute they're not spending on creating value from the data that you're collecting.
Absolutely, yeah. IT is 3 people here at the Celtics, so it is a very small team, and that's up from last year. So yeah, IT is very small, and if we're spending time on infrastructure, then we're not spending time on things that are very unique to our business, the stuff that happens during the game, at the arena, et cetera. So yeah, we wanted a more streamlined architecture where you didn't have to deal with SQL Server administration and some of those things, because those are skills that are not sort of part of the modern IT world, if you will. I learned them when I was a youngster, but they're not necessarily so important today. So yeah, modernization and optimization in this phase was huge to sort of get rid of some of that old legacy stuff that was still working fine, but just kind of clunky, expensive, slow. So, and all of that was part of this sort of optimization phase.
Yep. And this first section here is licensing is a very expensive component of running any infrastructure, especially if you're using a lot of Microsoft technology, which at the time you really were. And we managed to move all of the Windows servers to Linux and really did some significant efficiency and quality improvements as part of that, and greatly reduced the licensing costs. So that was sort of a little bit more work and effort, but a really good thing to do. And then, moving over to modern AWS services, right? So I believe at one point the queuing system basically was effectively inside of MS SQL, right, in the RDS server, and eliminated that, moving to a more modern platform for kind of queuing, along with caching and starting to adopt more native AWS solutions like Redshift, or more modern ones for data warehousing, and Glue for ETL. These were really starting to take advantage of the core native AWS services. And then my personal favorite aspect of all this is really the magic of infrastructure as code, right? Now the entire environment can be created and torn down and recreated and on demand. Can do single-click DR deployments, data being replicated in multiple regions, and starting to really get parallel with this. Data and analytics can often be, massively parallelized to greatly improve performance and time to getting data, right? Time to get your results. And so this one I think is really fun, because Jay and I were talking about kind of the magic of infrastructure as code. And as he mentioned, you have a small team, and really the way we view it together is that the mission resources and the Celtics resources, the team members together, are really a single unit, and they really operate that way. And we're all over the country, all over the world, but we're collaborating all the time. And infrastructure as code is a really great way to be able to do that.
Yeah, the Terraform and other infrastructure as code tools have really improved our ability to quickly and easily spin things up, spin things down, make changes, not worry about changes we made, because we know we can roll back to what we were doing the day before, test things out. So I've been really impressed with that.
Yeah.
The modernization is what the first modernization we had to go through before we could then get to the Terraform infrastructure as code world, and that was really big. The one thing that I always think about when we talk about that part of the journey is that we got so comfortable using AWS. The mission people would build servers, I would build servers, and somebody would say, oh, what about this? And, oh, let me just spin up another Windows server. And before you knew it, even though the stuff was cheap and it was saving us a lot of money, we were doing so much more, it was no longer cheap, because I just kept saying, oh, I'll build a server for that, I'll do this, I'll put Windows here, we'll put another SQL server. And so the cost kind of can get out of control because it's so easy to do.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very common challenge, right? The on-demand nature of the cloud is sort of this blessing and a curse. You can get whatever you want whenever you want it, but if you're going to continue using it, you have to be more strategic than just leaving it up, and how you do POCs and all of that. And I think infrastructure as code is a great way to enable that, because it gets you very quick cycles from spin up infrastructure, operate, test, and then spin it back down again. But cost optimization also, this highlights how that is not a thing that you do once. It's a thing that you're constantly doing, and this is something that Mission has a lot of core expertise. Our cloud analysts working with our customers, and we work with the Celtics on this, to always find recommendations on a week by week, month by month basis, and say, hey, there's opportunity here. Let's right size this. Let's move you to a different, family of instance. Let's move you to a different kind of storage or different tiered storage. These things are always critical and important, and definitely been a lot of effort on that front.
Yeah, actually, I get a daily report of cost of what things ran yesterday, and where we're spending our money day to day. And then monthly, one of our weekly meetings each month, we take the first 10 or 15 minutes and we talk about costs and optimizations of what hardware, you use the term loosely, hardware can be adjusted and should be adjusted to optimize cost and or performance. Sometimes we get to a point where we say, this thing is taking too long, or the reason we're spending money is because it's spinning so hard. Maybe a much bigger one with more headroom might actually cost us less money in the long run. So sometimes we're actually going to spend a little money for performance and or to save us in the long run.
Yes.
But it is ongoing, and we visit it. Like I said, I see a report every single day, and we talk about it much more formally once a month.
Absolutely. And just after phase 2 here, which we talked about all the different things that were done, we still saw another 25% cost reduction. A lot of that was driven by the licensing, but some optimization as well, right sizing. Another 15% improvement in data processing time. Not nearly as impressive as the hundreds of percent in that first phase that just getting to the cloud enabled, but obviously great continuous improvement in a phase that was primarily focused on cost reduction, and DR, which is another thing we achieved. So lots more stuff happened after that. So this was sort of the snapshot of what it looked like after phase 2, but not kind of the final state where we are now, or the current state, I should say. And you can see here, there was, some parallelization that's done. So these worker machines that, kind of scale up and scale down using Apache Airflow, to actually kind of orchestrate that work along with Celery and Redis. That really drastically improved the parallelization that was available. And we can lean into this even more later. Still a lot of stuff in SQL Server. I think not really a super modern data warehouse platform. And so there were changes that were made after that, notably the introduction of Snowflake. And I know that's been a good decision for y'all.
Yeah, our couple of key coders. Well, first of all, years, maybe even more than a decade ago, I would say to the coders every once in a while, it'd be like, so are we going to use SQL, MS SQL forever? And they would be, generally the answer was like, oh, we can't contemplate moving everything. It'd be so crazy to move out.
Right.
And then as the years progressed, and every year or so I would ask the question, are we in this forever? Are we ever leaving MS SQL? They eventually, the answers were a little softer, like, yeah, we should really consider that. What else should we do? Where could we move it? And eventually what they decided was they really liked the Snowflake architecture, sort of data lakey, which I don't even know exactly I don't know, it surpassed my knowledge, but anyway, they like the Snowflake, the price performance of Snowflake, that we're getting a lot more out of the warehouse or the data lake for a lot less money than continuing to build up a giant SQL instance, even if it's RDS.
Yeah, and I will note, I know there's going to be a question. It's like, well, why Snowflake versus the AWS native tools? And I think as a partner, one of the most important things we can do with our customers is to make sure they're picking the right tool for the job, right? Regardless of whether or not it's AWS. And AWS has some incredible options available in this space, but in this particular instance, Snowflake was the right call. So, there's lots of underlying AWS stuff going on as well. So I don't want to take anything away from that. Just happened to be a good core.
The AWS tools, change and come along every step of the way as well.
Yep.
Even though we moved the core data into Snowflake. One thing you mentioned is sort of the parallelization and worker machines and things. The other important thing that's been happening in maybe the last year or two is the automation, the Airflow and the Celery and that stuff. So a lot of that stuff gets spun up and spun down automatically. Some process will happen and the process will decide it needs 3 worker machines. Right. So the process spins up 3 worker machines, runs something, spins them back down, sends the answer off to some other table, and the analysts have it without ever having to go. We used to, spin up machines manually or have a schedule. Let's spin up these 3 machines at 10 p.m. because we know we need them. Yeah. But now the automation tools do this automatically. Spin up and spin down compute resources.
Yes, absolutely. And that's sort of the phase that was phase 3. And I would say this is in progress. Most of this has been done at this point. I think there's even additional stuff that's been going on. We'll have more updates on that as we start to close out those phases, as Jay and I do this a couple times a year. So stay tuned for that. But there's some key things to note here. Did some POCs on Aurora Postgres. Looked at kind of containerizing everything and getting into ECS Fargate. A lot of that has been done, Airflow, and a lot of the ETL as well, and a lot of auto scaling of mixed EC2 instances to make sure that we're using the right type of instance for the job. So R is very intensive on the CPU side, so we're making sure to choose the appropriate instance types there.
And memory.
And memory, yes. it just really likes all of the resources.
Yes, right. It likes all the resources, yes.
And we use code pipeline and code build automation as well to kind of help build out Docker images, doing vulnerability assessment, starting to use a lot of Lambda and serverless, helping things such as AMI and ASG automation, notification flows, and then continued work on cost opt. But security really became interesting at this point. And Jay, talk a little about that, because I always find this part really interesting.
Yeah, so we actually, during the last few years, developed a relationship with a security company who's a Celtics partner of ours, separate from the mission in AWS. But because the mission and AWS tools are so important to us, we wanted to integrate those over into the third party. So we did some SIM integrations, and we passed data from the AWS security tools over into the SIM, which happens to be QRadar, and we get insights there in our data aggregation security tools, and that's really helpful. Generally, they are non-important, which is great because the security on AWS and what Mission does, and we look at that within AWS all the time as well. And but we often see alerts and things that are generally we check each and every one of them down, but they're generally some developer did something that looked kind of like it could be a security issue, but it turns out it was just Luigi being Luigi, spinning up 12 machines and and doing it at once.
Yeah.
So,
and this again speaks to right tool for the job, right? And one of the great things about AWS is everything integrates with AWS, literally everything. So if you want to choose a particular SIM and maybe you want to make sure you have something that checks your endpoints, and you can do all of this, seamlessly because it enables that connection point. And you can take advantage of things like Security Hub and Guard Duty, the AWS security services, and it really, when you pull it all together, it gives you just more visibility. And that's been really interesting to work with the Celtics on, is making sure that all of the information we can get out of AWS is fed into the SIM that's useful. And yeah, it's really a nice advantage.
And partners, I always like the stories where my partners, my technology partners, are working together, where it's not, I've got the security partner and they're over in this one silo, and I've got Mission, who's the AWS partner, in this other silo. They're all extensions of my group, and they should all work together just like my group works together. And indeed, that has happened.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, and this actually transitions really nicely into this slide. One of the important things as a partner is we do a lot of work with other people, right? We're enabling their success. This is work we're doing for them. And other partners who are involved with our customers, they become just an extension there. And so we've had really good luck having, a holistic view of this whole team working together. Everybody knows their role, their responsibility, and again, having this collaboration point, this infrastructure that is, managed in AWS gives you a lot more capability to do that, right? So it's not, oh, let me tell you about my, bespoke data center situation or whatever. It's yeah, we use AWS, right? The APIs that are there are available. The services that are there are available. Maybe give us a little highlight, Jay, about what it's like, working with Mission and why you continue to be with Mission.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. And when Mission came into being out of a few other AWS companies that came together to form Mission, they at that time, if I don't even know, 4 years or so, 5 years, Jonathan?
5+ years, yeah.
5 years ago, it became a virtual company, and everybody worked in different places. They decided they were not going to do offices, and so we embraced that. And at the time, I was embracing doing Zoom meetings for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which I just couldn't be in enough places at once. So we started on this path with Mission. It felt a little weird early, where people from all over the country and sometimes all over the world, we would come together on Zoom and we would work as a team. And we weren't together physically. And it, like I said, seemed a little strange at the beginning, but it turned out it was working really well. And so when COVID hit, I always say it's a funny story, because COVID hits and the world discovers Zoom and how to bring disparate workers and workforces together in a virtual platform. And we were like, oh yeah, what do we think? We've been doing this for a few years. This isn't new to us, but it actually has been really fun, because we've been able to build relationships, technical, personal relationships, and be productive in this virtual environment, where that was the first time in my career, at least, where that really happened. That prior to that, most of my personal and technical relationships were face to face.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered what you asked me to talk to
No,
with it. That's what I answered.
no, definitely helpful, and absolutely has been a joy having the partnership. And I think one of the things that that has really worked out well is you're not giving us orders. You're asking us for help. You're not coming to us and saying, turn this on, turn this off. You're coming and saying, I have this goal. Can you be strategic for me and help me understand what my technology roadmap needs to look like? And this is when we really unlock the maximum from our customer relationships, is when we're thinking in business oriented ways, thinking about the goals and objectives, the business impact we're trying to make, not purely from the technology angle. The technology enables outcomes, not the other way around.
Right. And I focus a lot on this with my direct reports is, think big and wide and high level, but act low and deep and technical. And so we talk on our weekly calls, we talk both big and wide, and strategic, and also very tactical, and jump down in. Oh, well, if there's our strategic goal, let's go down here and build this whatever widget thing in AWS.
Yep.
And so that's been really good. And the other part of mission that's been really helpful to me is that I said think high and wide, the breadth of knowledge, so that there are database people, and there are cloud architects, and there are coding people, and a little bit of everything. DevOps is sort of the thing that we started with a lot. And so there's this breadth of knowledge which I couldn't build myself, or I could build it myself internally, but I'd have to hire way more people than I need in order to fill that breadth. The mission has the breadth of people, and I can tag them when I need them. I don't need a DevOps engineer every day, but when I do, there's one there. Or I don't need a cost optimized person every day, but when I need them, they're there.
That's and perfect transition into what's here, right? In terms of mission and how we help our customers and how we offer our team members, our resources, and our skill sets, it really is all about the customer's need, right? And so, Jay, you explained this very well. You need access to a broad skill set, but you don't always need dedicated people to do those things. You need that flexibility. You need your infrastructure team that you're working with, and mission, your partner, to act a little bit more like the cloud itself, right? You can spin up the particular types of resources you need when you need them. And this is by design. This is how we operate, right? And so we can do project-oriented work through statements of work, which is more like the migration we do. Like that phase one is very specific, outcome-oriented. We put the right resources on it, we achieve the outcome. But then there's so much work to continue doing. And we have two ways to do that, both dedicated teams and fractional teams. And you can swap between these. You can, expand and contract over time. And Jay and the Celtics have been using the fractional team, a service we call Cloud Elevate, which is super helpful because, again, you get access to that broad variety. You have a lot of consistency because we put a consultant right at the front and center, and they stick with the account. But then you have access to kind of back-end resources across all of these different practices. So if you need some data analytics, machine learning help, you can get it. If you need some modernization help, you can get it. Security, you can get it. And that has been really magical for us and the customer. Right. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of the managed services that we provide and how the Celtics are using them. We actually have kind of two core services. We have something we call Cloud Foundation, and this gives cost optimization, best practices, and AWS support. So a lot of customers are out there, they're paying for AWS's premium support options, business support or enterprise support. They cost money, and often that can be daunting. And what we do is we really help to make sure that we optimize our customers so that money is freed up to pay for something like support. And then we actually provide enterprise level support backed by AWS enterprise support, at a much better cost structure to our partner or to our customers. And we definitely have been providing those for the Celtics. And when you have an issue, you can open a ticket or you can start chatting with one of our engineers, and we'll try to resolve it for you, right? In addition, we have something called Cloud One, which includes all the stuff from Cloud Foundation, but also adds kind of 24/7 infrastructure monitoring, management, incident response. We use New Relic One, which is sort of a enterprise-grade, industry-leading observability platform that we all really love. We're partnering with Alert Logic for security and do lots of infrastructure operations, including automated provisioning, backups, patching, and replication. So again, AWS would call this undifferentiated heavy lifting, which I love that term. And it's, like Jay, you said, you got a small team, and we want them to be focused on building value, not on 24/7 monitoring, management, incident response, not on, trying to interface with AWS support directly when you can hand that to us and we'll take care of it for you. So this is really a core part of our business, and we're not just the type of partner who comes in, executes, and leaves, right? We're not the Navy SEALs. We're a partner in the truest sense of the word.
And that's an important one. Like the cost optimizations where I get a report every day, the monitoring and security and incident response, I see those alerts as they happen, but I don't act on them. Mission acts
Right.
on them. And that's really nice. I get to see the New Relic alerts all the time, but I also know they're getting dealt with. It goes back a long way. One of a former mission employee and I used to joke that what I really want is to just lie on the beach and drink a fruity drink and have the service deal with it all for me, and I wouldn't have to say, well, yeah, if the disk is out of space and it's on the disk, it would just happen. And so
that's a great business objective.
So I'm still not sitting on the beach drinking the fruity drinks, but I am not reacting to the alerts from AWS. Somebody else is, or a big team of people are reacting to what's going on.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'll close this out with just sort of a kind of offer that we have right now. So one of the things that we're experiencing in the current kind of market is that a lot of people are not hiring, right? They're choosing to work with contractor resources, and they're needing access to skill sets, and perhaps they are on a hiring freeze, or for whatever reason. And everyone's very cost conscious right now about those kind of ongoing month-to-month costs and getting visibility. So what we're doing is we have this great offer where you basically get 10% off of all those contractor resources, those consulting resources we talked about before, whether it's a dedicated team, a fractional team, outcome-oriented project, and we'll give you 5% off of your AWS spend guaranteed, right? Which means that we'll pay for ourselves, right? And this has been a huge success for our customers because they're able to achieve their goals without having to hire when maybe they have a hiring freeze. They're getting savings and the opportunity to continuously work with a great team at Mission. So encourage you to check that out. If you're interested, you can definitely give us a ring. We have some great ways to contact us on our website. You'll also receive some kind of follow-up email after this, so you can kind of click through and get access to this awesome offer. So with that,
we're going to hit, Jonathan, do we have time to hit a couple questions? Because there are actually one or two that I find interesting questions that I was going to hit.
Absolutely. I think that's where we are now. So let's dive into those.
So one of the questions, I don't want to read it verbatim, but essentially it talks about if old time players had this kind of data and analysis for them, would they have been as good or better, or would the other players have known how to defend them better, et cetera? And how does sort of player talent play into data analysis in pro sports? And I think about this all the time, and I discuss it with my bosses because they're like, oh, Jay, you're spending all this money. Do we really need to be doing this? And in the basketball side of our business, they just want to spend more and more, hire more and more analysts, and they come to me, is it really relevant? And so I'm going to give a couple answers to that. So first of all, there's a Larry Bird story that most basketball junkies have heard, where Larry Bird came up the court with the ball once and somebody was defending him, and he was in one of his Larry Bird moves where he was talkative that night. And he told the defender exactly what he was going to do. He said, I'm going to take this ball, I'm going to dribble there, I'm going to turn to my left, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to shoot over you from that spot right over there. And the defender's like, oh, great, he told me what to do, I'm going to stop him. And Larry Bird did exactly what he said, and the defender couldn't stop him. And so that was a case of where Larry Bird's talent was so good that it didn't matter that you knew exactly what he was going to do. You still couldn't stop him. And that is true sometimes. LeBron James can sometimes be so good that it doesn't matter if you know exactly what he's going to do, you still can't stop him because he's better, faster, stronger, whatever. However, we've also seen the data analytics many times point things out to us where we can be effective even on phenomenal talent. LeBron, definitely, we've in the 2008 finals run, when we won the finals, we had to get through Cleveland, and the data definitely helped us with some defensive moves with LeBron in that series against Cleveland. And so there are some things that it helps you do. However, sometimes when LeBron's going to dribble past you, or when Steph Curry's going to make a 45-foot three, doesn't matter that you know he's going to do it. He's still going to do it. So yes and no on that one. Then there was a more technical one. I like that one because I like to talk basketball every once in a while, even though I come from a tech background. I've been turned into a basketball junkie. There was another question that says, do we still maintain R scripts for the analysis, or do we move to more AWS supported tool? We still use R a lot, and that is mostly due, I'd say, that our core mathematicians are so comfortable with R. We do a lot of other things as well, but R is still at the heart of a lot of what we do. And again, it's the mathematicians. We have actually two of our mathematicians both came from Duke, interestingly enough, different eras, so they didn't know each other. And they're our junkies, and they love it. And who am I to try and stop them?
I think that's awesome that whether it's a player or it's on the court, or a player that's a mathematician, a lot of them are coming from Duke. And I'm an ACC guy. I went to Georgia Tech, so that kind of hurts me a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay. We have any other questions? And yeah, while we still have a couple minutes left, feel free to toss a question in. I'll start wrapping up, unless Jay, you have any other commentary. But as I mentioned before, we have that great offer with the 10% off of kind of resources to help you out, 5% off your AWS bill, which can help pay for that, if not pay for it entirely. So definitely get in touch with us. You can see there's a phone number, there's an email, info@missioncloud.com. Our website is missioncloud.com. Please do get in touch. And going to go ahead and ask really quickly, if you're interested in speaking with a Mission Cloud advisor about getting into this offer and getting a competitive advantage, please go ahead and select yes. This is a great way to help us make sure that we get in touch with you. So we'll leave this up and allow to collect responses. In the meantime, I'll keep my eye on the questions, but otherwise I'll say, thank you so much to everyone for being here. Thank you to Jay for as always, providing wonderful insights. It's been such an awesome partnership, and I really can't wait to see what we do next. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'd really love to start exploring, what we can do with those API pulls, where we're getting a lot more close to the real-time data streams. I think there's lots of opportunity there. So thank you all so much. Jay, thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Always enjoy it.